What if I told you that the most democratic workplaces of the 1700s weren't in fancy parliament halls, but on ships filled with drunk, tattooed men who hadn't bathed in months? Yeah. Welcome aboard, matey. Pirates may have been thieves, killers, and general hygiene disasters, but when it came to human rights, they were centuries ahead of their time. Picture it: the naval world of the 18th century, where sailors were whipped for sneezing wrong and your paycheck depended on how much your captain felt like it that day. Pirates looked at that system and said, "Nah, we'll make our own HR department, and it comes with better rum." So today, we're comparing life as a sailor under His Majesty's Navy versus life as a so-called criminal of the high seas. Spoiler alert: the criminals had vacation days. Stick around, because you're about to realize why so many men ditched the Queen's Navy and grabbed the black flag. Oh, and hit subscribe unless you enjoy being flogged for insubordination. History's dark, sarcastic, and barely PG-13, so you may as well join the crew before we all sink together. Number 1. Democracy in a barrel of rum. Imagine a world where your boss could literally have you whipped, keel-hauled, or starved for questioning his lunch orders. That was life in the Royal Navy. Sailors were basically human furniture, cheap, replaceable, and guaranteed to die smelling like salted beef. Pirates, on the other hand, took one look at that nonsense and decided, nah, we're doing elections. Seriously, pirate ships ran like floating democracies. Every man had a vote, from the quartermaster to the cook. Captains were elected and could be voted out if they got too bossy or too stingy with the booty. Try doing that in the Navy, and you'd be swinging from the yardarm before sunset. It wasn't perfect, of course. This wasn't some enlightened parliamentary utopia. It was democracy with a hangover. But it meant something radical for its time. On pirate ships, your voice mattered as much as anyone else's. Unless you were talking during ration time, then your voice definitely didn't matter. Basically, pirates invented the world's drunkest version of workers' rights. And yet somehow, it worked. Number 2. The payroll was a mutiny waiting to happen. Here's the dirt. Naval sailors got paid, but not really. Their wages were delayed for months, sometimes years, and the officers skimmed off the top like corrupt accountants with better wigs. You could die at sea and still owe your uniform fees. Pirates, however, loved a little thing called profit sharing. After every raid, they divided the loot based on agreed shares. The captain got a few extra portions for leading, the surgeon got a bonus, because sewing up sword wounds isn't easy, and everyone else got a fair cut. Even the guy who sharpened the knives earned honest silver for honest stabbing. It was capitalism meets chaos, but at least it was transparent. You knew exactly what you were risking your neck for. In the Navy, risk got you food poisoning and a pat on the back from someone named Lord Something Snooty. On a pirate ship, risk got you gold and bragging rights. So when sailors mutinied and turned pirate, it wasn't just greed, it was economics with style. Number 3, chains or choice. You pick. You know that awkward moment when someone forces you to work for them by literally kidnapping you off the street? Yeah, that was called impressment, and it was the British Navy's favorite recruitment strategy. Sailors didn't join. They were taken. One minute you're drinking in a harbor tavern, next minute you're chained to a cannon and being yelled at by a man whose powdered wig smells like death and tobacco. Pirates? They didn't bother with that nonsense. Crew members joined willingly, often after being persuaded with rum and promises of gold, sure, but once you were in, it was by your own choice. You agreed to the code. You shared the loot. You could walk away after a voyage, no questions asked, as long as you didn't steal the rum on your way out. The irony? Pirates were criminals offering more consent than the royal military. It's like comparing a street gang with free healthcare to a corporation that withholds your paycheck because you coughed near the supervisor. So yeah, piracy wasn't just rebellion. It was a giant middle finger to monarchies everywhere. Number 4, equality with a side of scurvy. In the Royal Navy, Social hierarchy was everything. Officers dined on roast duck and imported wine, while the crew gnawed on worms pretending to be biscuits. Your birth determined your worth, not your skills, not your courage, just whether your dad owned land or sheep. Pirates? They didn't care if you were noble born or barely literate. If you could fight, navigate, or play the fiddle, you were in. Many ships were shockingly inclusive for their time. Black sailors, freed slaves, and even a few women disguised as men found spots in pirate crews. Equality didn't mean comfort. It meant everyone suffered the same terrible food and smelled equally awful. Still, when you stood on deck under a stolen flag, you weren't someone's servant. You were a partner in crime. On land, society shut its doors. At sea, pirates kicked them off the hinges. Ironically, the dirtiest, most violent men afloat were pioneers of egalitarianism. Makes you wonder, maybe a little shared scurvy brings people together. Number 5, the pirate code was real and surprisingly sensible. If you think pirates were chaotic madmen stabbing each other over treasure maps, think again. These floating anarchists actually had written constitutions. Yep. Before most nations figured out democracy, pirates had codes of conduct that laid out shares, discipline, and behavior rules. Break the code, like stealing another man's loot or sneaking off during battle, and you'd face punishment, often decided by a majority vote. It wasn't lawless. It was self-regulated chaos, like an early workplace policy manual written by drunk philosophers. The biggest rule? Respect the booty. Seriously. Theft from crewmates was worse than murder. Murder could be forgiven. Messing with the money could not. Compare that to naval law, where captains could order lashes for sneezing too loud. Pirates believed in fairness because fairness kept ships functional. You couldn't survive storms or battles if half the crew wanted to throw you overboard. Basically, pirates invented office policies, but with more eye patches. Number 6, the rum was democracy. Naval sailors got daily rations of beer or watered-down rum, but it wasn't a privilege. It was sedation. Keep the poor lads drunk enough not to mutiny, but sober enough to swab decks. That was the Navy's method. Pirates, though. Rum wasn't a leash. It was liberty in liquid form. They drank to celebrate loot, mourn losses, and debate ship politics. Rum flowed during elections, punishments, even spiritual arguments. Which god loves me most after I stab a guy? It wasn't debauchery. It was ritual. Plus, ship doctors found rum killed bacteria. So technically, pirates were innovators of alternative medicine. You had a headache? Rum. Got a sword wound? More rum. Existential dread from committing ocean crimes? Double rum. So when people say pirates were just alcoholics, they're missing the truth. Rum was the currency of freedom, and occasionally, the reason no one remembered last night's vote. Number 7, punishment, piracy style. In the Navy, discipline came with flair, specifically a flair for cruelty. You could be flogged until your back looked like spaghetti or keel-hauled, which is when sailors were tied to a rope and dragged under the ship's barnacle-covered hull, because apparently death by tetanus was too subtle. Pirates? Still brutal, don't get me wrong, but their punishments actually made sense. The pirate crew, not the captain alone, decided the penalty, usually loss of pay, extra duty, or being marooned with a gun and one shot, which, in pirate logic, counted as giving you a fighting chance. But they didn't punish for ego. You didn't get flogged for sneezing or sneering. Pirate justice was about order to obedience. If you broke the code, you faced the crew, not the whip of some aristocrat who hadn't worked a day in his life. Ironically, the pirates who terrorized empires treated their own workers better than most bosses do now. So yeah, pirates were dangerous maniacs, but they were also pioneers of peer review. Number 8, healthcare on a floating death trap. A naval ship's idea of healthcare was, don't die on my watch. Medical officers often had no training, just a saw, a bucket, and optimism. Surgeries were performed without anesthesia, and infection was basically a Monday. Pirate ships weren't hospitals either, but they were practical. Many included a surgeon, sometimes kidnapped because tradition, and prioritized caring for wounded crew. After all, a dead sailor couldn't fight or drink. Pirate codes sometimes even promised compensation. Lost a leg, get more gold. Lost both, retire early with a fat share. In a world where empires treated sailors like meat, pirates treated them like investments. It's grim, sure, but logical. Happy, healthy criminals worked harder. Basically, the pirates had a proto-version of workers' comp, which means every HR department owes them a thank you toast. Number 9. Personal freedom, personal stench. Imagine walking up to your naval officer and saying, "You know what? I quit." You couldn't. You'd be lucky to survive saying good morning without formal approval. The Navy controlled everything. Your sleep, clothes, meals, even your facial hair. You were property. Pirates, though, totally opposite. Want earrings? Do it. Tattoos? Required. Musical instruments? Encouraged. Pirates broadcast their freedom in every symbol society hated. They were the original punks, loud, tattooed, and covered in questionable liquids. They dressed how they wanted, spoke how they wanted, and laughed while doing it. Freedom wasn't abstract. It was bodily. You owned yourself, your choices, your death, and occasionally a few stolen French cannons. So while naval sailors lived smelling like rules and boiled cabbage, pirates reeked of liberty and unwashed ambition, the scent of freedom, and maybe a bit of fish rot. Number 10. Retirement plans and mutiny options. The average naval sailor didn't retire. He just stopped existing somewhere between a foreign fever and unpaid wages. If you did live long enough to retire, you got a pat on the back and maybe half a loaf of bread. Pirates, strangely, had structure. Their retirement plan often came in the form of shares, literal chunks of gold or jewels banked away for later. Successful pirates could buy taverns, go legit, or bribe their way into polite society pretending to be merchants. Others made tropical beach retirements happen centuries before Instagram influencers did. Of course, if your captain went power mad or stingy, mutiny was your 401k. You and the crew could democratically tell him, "We're promoting you to fish food." It was risky, violent, and somehow fairer than corporate layoffs. Pirates didn't wait for HR paperwork to fix toxic leadership. They threw toxic leadership overboard. So yeah, in a twisted way, pirates had built-in job security. Just keep your dagger sharp and your captain humble. Number 11. Every flag a rebrand. The Jolly Roger wasn't simply edgy graphic design, it was pirate brand management. Each crew designed their own flags, skeletons, bleeding hearts, or hourglasses, reminding victims their time was up. This was a psychological weapon and a marketing tool. Ships often surrendered immediately at the sight. No blood necessary. Meanwhile, naval ships flew the flag of their empire, tidy, safe, and utterly soulless. They fought under bureaucratic paperwork. Pirates fought under art. Their flags screamed authenticity. We're bad, but at least we're honest about it. Every black flag was a declaration of personal freedom turned aesthetic rebellion. It's what happens when you give angry sailors a sewing kit and too much imagination. Today's startup logos wish they had that much brand recognition. Basically, pirates invented viral branding 300 years before social media, all while committing light treason. Number 12. Recruitment. Steal first, interview later. Picture a naval recruiter. Fancy uniform, promises of glory, conveniently forgetting to mention disease and torture. In reality, they often just grabbed drunk men off the docks. Royal impressment agents were like kidnappers with government funding. Pirates recruited differently. Sure, sometimes they invited captured sailors to join, but there was negotiation. Join us and get rich, or don't, and we'll toss you overboard. Surprisingly, many said yes without hesitation. Why? Because pirate life meant agency. You weren't trapped under nobles or officers. You were part of something self-governed. It was dangerous, but so was starvation under the crown. At least piracy offered a paycheck, and weekends full of rum. We laugh now, but think about it. When your choices are tyranny or freedom with risk, the black flag starts to look pretty tempting. Number 13. When law meant loot. Here's the weirdest part. Pirates were technically more lawful than the governments hunting them. Empires claimed they fought for justice, but most naval campaigns were legally sanitized theft, colonial expeditions, privateering licenses, and all that polite nonsense. Pirates didn't hide behind paperwork. They stole from the rich and didn't bother justifying it. They saw through the empire's hypocrisy. Why call it commerce when your ships are armed to the teeth? The pirates' logic was simple. If everyone's stealing, might as well be honest about it. It was moral anarchy, sure, but also a kind of ethical clarity. The British, Spanish, and French all looted the world while calling it civilization. Pirates just dropped the PR department and kept the loot. So yes, pirates were villains, but in a world built on selective morality, they were the only ones not pretending to be saints. Number 14. Death wears an earring. In the Navy, sailors who died were forgotten. Their bodies were dumped at sea, their names erased unless they were officers. Dying in service of an empire didn't earn you a song, just paperwork. Pirates, on the other hand, turned death into spectacle. They faced it flamboyantly. Earrings often served as mini savings accounts for funerals, and many wore them as symbols of victory over death itself. Execution wasn't tragedy, it was performance art. Some pirates strutted to the gallows smiling, cracking jokes, or declaring loyalty to the sea rather than the crown. They didn't fear death because they'd already escaped a worse fate: obedience. Pirate freedom always came with an expiration date, but they died owning that choice. So while the Navy offered anonymity, piracy gave you legend. Choose your afterlife: quiet paperwork or eternal ghost story. Number 15. The ocean doesn't care who's king. At sea, rank meant nothing when the storm hit. That's what pirates understood better than anyone. The ocean stripped away titles, noble bloodlines, and uniforms. All that mattered was who could sail, fight, and keep the ship afloat. In that sense, pirates weren't rebels against the crown. They were rebels against hierarchy itself. They lived and died by their own code, flawed, but theirs. That's what made piracy so intoxicating. Real power, even if it came drenched in salt water and sin. And maybe that's the ultimate punchline of history. The dirtiest people afloat understood freedom better than the rulers who wrote laws about it. If history teaches us anything, it's that freedom's messy. Sometimes it smells like sweat, gunpowder, and cheap rum. Pirates weren't heroes. They were just done being tools of kings. And in their chaos, they built something modern society still dreams about. A world where every person had a say, a share, and a shot, even if it came with scurvy. So next time you're stuck in a boring meeting wishing for mutiny, just remember, somewhere out there, a pirate ghost is nodding in approval. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.